We used to call it coastal chaos. Now we just say that the ACC is a mess, and we love it. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. 2 weeks left in the regular season, and who knows who's going to win the ACC. We have looked at recent weeks. Virginia falling, Louisville falling twice. Miami's lost 2 of its last 4 or 5 games. Therefore, the likelihood of 2 teams advancing from the ACC into the college football playoff is basically null and void. You have to win the ACC. I guess Miami has a slim shot as a 10-2 football team that does not go to the ACC championship game based on its wins against Notre Dame in particular, and also South Florida, that the Canes have a snowball shot in hell, basically, of reaching the CFP as an at-large. So let's look at the all-important ACC championship game and the likely scenarios. And we point to our buddy Brad Crawford, friend of the network, friend of myself, and we appreciate Brad's work at CBS Sports because he has lightened the load considerably for me, because I was going to delve into this and try to break down all the scenarios based on the ACC tiebreakers. But Brad has done this for us, so we point you to his article on CBS Sports. First, let's check out the standings at the top of the conference. Georgia coming off a narrow win against Boston College in which they trailed by 11 points in the fourth quarter, defeat BC 36-34, so Georgia Tech is 9-1 overall, 6-1 in the ACC. Virginia's coming off a win against Duke, 34-17. That was on the road. Big win for the Cavaliers as they stay with just 1 loss in the conference at 5-1. Ditto SMU. SMU was off last week, and they are 5-1 in the ACC. Number 22, Pitt, coming into this weekend. They will certainly fall out of the CFP rankings. They suffered a loss to Notre Dame, obviously, outside the conference. Miami, number 15 in the land, 8-2, now 4-2 in the conference after they just completely annihilated NC State 41-7. Duke still has some hope. 5-5 overall, 4-2 in the conference after they lost to the Cavaliers 34-17. Now looking at the remaining schedules for the contenders, we start with Georgia Tech. They've got a huge game at home in Atlanta against Pitt coming up this Saturday, November 22nd. They finish the season, as they always do, against rival Georgia outside the conference. For Virginia, they've got a bye week to get themselves ready for their final game of the season, the rivalry matchup against Virginia Tech. That one's going to be played at home in Charlottesville. Now looking at the Mustangs coming off a bye, they've got Louisville at home November 22nd, then finish out the regular season on the West Coast against Cal. Pitt will try to bounce back from that drubbing at the hands of the Irish as they go to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech, as we mentioned, and arguably the most important game in the ACC this season. And then Pitt would have to follow that up with a win against Miami. That game is going to be at home on November 29th. Miami's got 2 consecutive wins under their belts in the ACC against Syracuse and NC State. They have won those games by a combined 28 points and then by 34 points. They go to Virginia Tech to take on the Hokies this weekend, and then they go to Pitt. And then we've got Duke, who could still crash the party with the ugliest of records in the ACC championship game, currently at 5-5 overall with those 3 out-of-conference losses. Coming off the loss to Virginia at home, Duke goes to North Carolina, and then they take on Wake Forest to close out 2025. And once again, our thanks to Brad Crawford of CBS Sports, who laid out all the tiebreakers, including at the top, Georgia Tech. It's very simple for the Yellow Jackets. If they defeat Pitt, they're in the ACC championship game at 7-1 in conference. Now, here's the path for Virginia to reach the conference championship game in Charlotte. They've got to beat rival Virginia Tech. They also need SMU to lose to either Louisville or Cal. They also need Pitt to trip up against either Georgia Tech or Miami. Let's look at this narrow path for Miami to reach the ACC championship game. They've got to win their final 2 games, of course. Also seems counterintuitive, but they need Virginia to defeat Virginia Tech because it sets up a different set of tie-breaking rules with these games in play. Pitt beats Georgia Tech, Duke beats North Carolina, SMU beats Louisville, or Cal beats SMU. Wake Forest beats Duke. For the Pitt Panthers to reach the ACC championship game, it's even a longer shot. They've got to defeat Georgia Tech and Miami. They're going to be an underdog in both of those games. They need SMU to lose to Louisville or Cal to bring them down to 2 losses. Virginia needs to beat Virginia Tech. And therefore, we've got a Pitt 7-1 team and Virginia at 7-1 advancing to the ACC championship game. SMU, of course, reached the conference championship game in their first year in the ACC in 2024, losing to Clemson. They could get back there by winning their final 2 games, getting Virginia Tech with a win over Virginia. Then they need Pitt to beat Georgia Tech, and they also need Miami then to beat Pitt. So they need basically Pitt to split their final 2 games, Virginia to get upset, and then SMU would finish at 7-1 and Pitt at 6-2, and that would knock Miami out of the head-to-head situation with Pitt. So the Panthers would move on to an ACC championship game against SMU. Okay, that's what could happen. What is going to happen? I'm fairly confident Georgia Tech can get it done against Pitt, regardless of how bad the Yellow Jackets look this weekend, and also lost their previous game to NC State by 12 points. Georgia Tech's going to be at home as a 3.5-point favorite against Pitt. So they win, they're in at 7-1. And of course, Georgia Tech's best wins this season, not necessarily that impressive against Clemson, Wake Forest, and Duke. Again, they lost to NC State. Pitt's best wins this year, Florida State and NC State, 2 5-5 teams. And of course, they've already lost to West Virginia, Louisville, and got bludgeoned by Notre Dame 37-15. Bet on Haynes King and Brent Key to get it done at home, and Georgia Tech moves on to the ACC championship game at 7-1. Who will they face? Well, Virginia, of course, with the win, they're 7-1 as well. They defeat Virginia Tech. They'll be a decent favorite. We don't have a line on that game. It's in 2 weeks. But then if Virginia obviously could move into a situation where we've got all hell breaking loose, if the Cavaliers lose that game, then they drop to 6-2. And Miami actually would need that because it sets up a different set of tiebreakers that we just reviewed. We believe Miami's the best team. That's my thought on the process, is that Miami's the best football team, but they're most likely going to miss the ACC championship game and miss a shot at the playoff and hope that there's just complete chaos in the Big Ten and the SEC to open the door for Miami. They've got wins against Notre Dame, South Florida, and NC State. Of course, they suffered those losses to Louisville when Carson Beck threw 4 picks, and also lost that overtime game in Dallas against SMU. Right now, Miami's a 17.5-point favorite this weekend against Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and expect them, even though it's a road game, to be at least a touchdown favorite against Pitt. That's the setup for the ACC. It is a mess, but it's fun to figure out and try to figure out the possible scenarios and what could lie ahead. And really, nothing's going to be a surprise because none of these teams are clearly better than the others. If anything, Miami's probably the best team, but on the outside looking in. Keep it locked in here, the voice of college football. And maybe we'll look at some other conferences. The SEC is obviously an interesting one to look at, more from a playoff standpoint than an SEC championship game standpoint, because we're going to have both teams from the SEC title game, of course, make the CFP. We'll see you next time right here at the Voice of College Football.